Hi everyone. In this video, I had the opportunity to sit down with Ali Bass. Ali is an award-winning junior high teacher. She's also taught in high school, and she's a PhD student in our curriculum and instruction science education program at the University of Wyoming. So Ali is an expert on the NGSS standards, and she was helping us with how we might situate the teaching and learning that you can do as teachers based upon the videos that we've created for the Virtual Roadshow. So Ali had some incredibly intuitive things to share with us, to help guide us and to think deeply. So in this sort of casual interview, we were talking together about ways in which you can use as a parent or as a teacher, that you can help your students use these in such a way that they'll also be simultaneously meeting standards, but not just that, also learning three-dimensionally across standards, learning transference and synthetic skills with these videos.
Yeah. Well, so my first thoughts, and like I put it in the email, is just twofold. Like, I think that even not being in this situation of COVID and social distancing, I think that these would also be just good videos for what we call phenomena. And so phenomenon can come from like a lot of things, as you know, Rachel. It can be your experiences. It can be a place-based, something happening right outside that you can take the kids to. But sometimes a lot of like the chemistry ones was what I was thinking, because those were the videos you posted, were like, yeah, you don't really, a lot of our chemistry teachers, and especially in our middle school level teachers, I struggle with like, how do I engage kids in this idea when we're talking about particles that we can't see? We're talking about ideas that are microscopic to the point of electron microscopes. So how do I engage them in that activity with a phenomenon to get them to answer questions and to begin the three-dimensional process of learning? And when I was watching the videos you sent, the first thing I thought, well, these are perfect phenomenon. You don't even have to show all of them as a teacher. Just pulling, like I was thinking of the titration one. We don't really run titrations in middle school, but we do have some standards that talk about chemical reactions and conservation of atoms and energy, and that those molecules can be rearranged. And how do you know that those molecules are being rearranged? And I was like, even the titration podcast, you could just pull out a minute or two segment showing the color change for chemical and physical changes, or for rearranging of particles, and ask the kids, wow, guys, there's our phenomena. Why did it change colors? What is this?
Right, right. That makes a lot of sense, because then they're seeing a phenomenon that they can very much tangibly connect to. And then you can get them thinking about the fact that chemically something must have changed in order to beget the physical change that we perceive as color. That makes a lot of sense. And
Yeah,
it's
I mean,
something they can perform.
yeah, pulling those just segments out and then asking the kids. I mean, so the idea of the new standards in their three-dimensional form is really to be student driven, and there's connections between standards. And so we really want the students to be looking at a phenomena, and it's no longer about hooking a kid. It's about using that phenomena as the anchor and getting them to be scientists, and ask those questions and drive. Well, what do we need to know? Well, why, like what steps would we need to take to understand why it turned from white to pink, or whatever. I think it was pink, right? Pink to white or something.
Yeah,
In the video.
that's a whole spectrum ranging all the way from pink at very acidic pHs, all the way up to like a green when you get really basic.
Yeah, I mean, and then the fact that the teacher could use that clip then to make a safe experiment for the students.
Right.
So maybe the clip is the phenomena, they get the kids asking the questions, the kids develop the next steps they need to take. Well, and then the teacher already has in their back pocket a safe experiment to do. So who would have thought a middle school teacher would do a titration? I mean, like really, some high school teachers get nervous about titrations. but here's a cheap, inexpensive, safe way
Mhm.
to do a titration. And the kids could essentially, even though the teacher's guiding them, knowing because they've watched your video, they know that how to do this. You can, you can go ahead and have that teacher, that's their little secret, and be like, oh, you guys are right. Oh, we could use, what about cabbage? And then the kids could dig into what are the properties of cabbage and how could they use it, and really get them to think three-dimensionally about these topics.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. And I was even thinking about, as you were saying, that this idea that they could even make a hypothesis, thinking about what they what they think baking soda is. Do they think it's an acid? Do they think it's a base rate? Having them put forward a hypothesis and then having that be evidence being used, even the videos being used as evidence to test that hypothesis. And I know, with that three-dimensional, that, this idea of patterns that can be used as evidence to support an explanation, that you could engage with the videos in that way. And then, yeah, as you're saying, a safe experiment that they can do in their kitchen, because that could be yet another hypothesis. Well, Ella tested baking soda, but what do I think about lemon juice? What do I prepare?
Yeah.
That? Yeah.
And
And
I love that they're safe right now with COVID, because if your parents are parents that can afford, and or we can't require this right now during online learning. So if we take it outside of the classroom idea and into the COVID experience, if parents want to, you could make that an optional, right? Well, why don't you see if you can get similar results?
yes. Mm-hmm.
So those kids who want to go on and test it, and I love the idea of getting them off of the computer, getting them doing something that's not staring at the screen all day.
Right. Yeah, that's a good point, because one of those cornerstones of science is replicability. So even just, can you replicate this word? And if you can't, what could be some of the explanations behind that? What could be different about the reagents that you used as opposed to what was used in the video?
Yeah, I mean, and you could go into cause and effect. So why, which is a cross-cutting concept, you could ask them to do a little cause and effect. If it's not replicable, what was, the cause, and why did it affect your experiment in a different way? Or, yeah. So
Right.
I think teachers could use these in a lot of ways in class when we do go back to classroom, and even potentially as enrichment type activities during COVID for the families that can afford or want to be more involved, and reducing some of that screen time and increasing some of that experimental hands-on time.
Yeah. No, I love that, right? You're getting up, you're getting away from the screen, you're doing something hands-on, something safe. Yeah, all of that is huge. And I'm also thinking too about, like, just the phenomenon as something that underlies a lot of different. There are so many different ways that you can knit that phenomenon through different conceptual applications. So, like with the pH indicator, there's different ways that we could think about. One that I've been pondering is that you can use pH indicators to determine the metabolic byproducts of other life forms. So, for example, if we wanted to see what baker's yeast, like if we took baker's yeast and streaked it on a potato slice, that was actually the first petri dish, was basically a boiled potato that you can use the surface as a petri dish. So you could actually take that pH indicator, put it on the potato, and see if the yeast turn it a different color, like what kinds of byproducts are the yeast making. So then you could kind of get into that, almost transdisciplinary use of the phenomenon to get into biological systems as well.
Yeah, and there's and a lot of teachers aren't really aware of these. But Open SciEd has done a lot of research into the section in the NGSS called connections to standards arranged by topic. And so the standards were built to not only vertically align, but to also interconnect within grade levels. And so so what you're speaking of would intentionally be a PS one standard for chemical reactions in middle school, but then it's also intentionally meant to connect with the cellular respiration and photosynthesis standards in the biology. And that's part of that is the metabolism. And so I don't know if in the Wyoming standards document they have those. A lot of the states don't have all this built in, and let alone have anybody in state in-house who's done enough research or expertise in it to teach it to their teachers, right? So I'm just going to flip my camera real quick. Yeah. In the NGSS book, it's the blue. Right. They're by color, so there's green, and then there's orange, and then the blue section is connections. Connections, I don't even know. I'm sorry, my camera's so bad. Connections to standards arranged by topic. And what it does, it shows, it like literally tells the teacher, like if I go to that, I'll just go to middle school. The middle school one, I said PS.
It was PS1.
Yeah, chemical reactions. So PS1, 2 for chemical reactions will also link back to LS 1C, which is the physical and which is the photosynthesis and cellular respiration standard. Yeah. So it literally tells the teachers where those connections should be so that when they're building the bundles, they know what cross-cutting standards they will have with that.
Right.
To cover, which doesn't mean that you have to assess on that standard. What it means is that you should have some level of understanding chemical reactions built into your biology unit, and that in physical science, you should have some level of biological chemistry built into your chemical reactions.
Right.
That's what the connection is they want it brought up. So it doesn't mean you have to do an intentional whole unit. It doesn't mean you have to quiz on it. It just means they want that connection being made in some way. So meaning that I could not expect my Open SciEd says it would be incorrect to expect my middle school students to be able to model cellular respiration without having some kind of an understanding of atoms being arranged, which would be a PS1 chemical reaction standard.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Upon the foundation of their understandings there, they can build. The video that we did with the paper chromatography, we do the coffee filter chromatography, really relates the chemistry of the chromatography and the stationary mobile phase and the chemical separation back to the fact that what we're separating is the pigments that are from the plants. So from the cabbage, from the spinach. So we're separating things like chlorophyll A, chlorophyll B. So you're really seeing, right, the chemistry of the paper chromatography at the same time as thinking about the fact that the chemicals that we're separating are the light harvesting pigments for photosynthesis. So that would be a perfect one for knitting those two together and helping with that, that transfer.
Yeah. And so I think I see, that's why I emailed back, because I just think if, like teachers could see that value. So the phenomena doesn't have to be about your test, because essentially your assessment phenomena will not be what you've taught at all. This is the piece that's very, very hard for teachers. And I've learned this especially when as I've been doing professional development with Anna and Martha on assessment, and Claire on assessments, is the anchoring phenomena you're using in the classroom to teach and to get the kids to think about all these concepts is not the same you'll be testing on, because you want to use a different phenomena on your assessment that then will get them to transfer that knowledge in. And that's, you'll see if that long-term memory has been built with these concepts and ideas. And so I love the idea of having something tangible and safe that the kids can do and relate to, and then trying to bring it in with your assessment in a different way.
Yeah, yeah. No, yeah, absolutely. And really giving them permission to practice the transference skills. So, if they can see it done for one phenomenon, and then maybe try it at home for something else, or that curiosity really is at the heart of building transference skills, because you ask, well, what would it be like for this one? So it is like that for this. What about this?
Well, and I think that's when you say that's at the heart, but that's kind of at the heart of us as scientists too. Right?
Yeah.
Like that is you 100%. Like you're always wondering, oh, well, what about this? But what, and I think that's the same as that's how we get our next research questions to think about. I mean, like my friend just sent me an article on how the extremophiles in Yellowstone helped with the processing of DNA quicker, which is helping. Yeah. So I know you know all about that because you're like, the expert in that. So, but that to me was just like one of those ideas where here's another phenomena, right? So if we've taught them about enzymes and then we bring in and or microbes, and then here's a anchoring phenomena you can do your lesson with, that's a recent headline in the news, and then you can break it down into smaller pieces and talk about how would a scientist have ever thought to look in a hot springs, right? Like that curiosity of where do we get our ideas from to move our science forward, right?
Yeah. Absolutely. That is very much the foundation, the heartbeat of science is curious people making outrageous connections. I think for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, and I really love this idea that, like for instance, Jessica's video really made me think about how, and this isn't across the board, always, there are some teachers who are excellent at astronomy and earth science, but a lot of the times earth science is not the field that our teachers have gotten their emphasis in. The majority teachers are getting their emphasis in biology, chemistry, physical sciences. I think there's more and more people coming out with some earth science emphasis, but those areas are a little bit lacking, I guess, is my best term for it, in the sense of what teachers choose to do their emphasis in when they're doing their undergraduate. And so Jessica's, and we know physics is always low. I mean, we struggle all the time to get physics teachers, right? But biology would be the first, the number one thing that a teacher gets an emphasis in before they go into teaching. And I think that Jessica's videos just are so valuable in the sense that, so you get a job in a district and you have to all of a sudden teach some of these earth science standards, but you have never had an astronomy class, even though her activity was very elementary in a sense, right? Yeah. The way that she processed and worked through that with her images as she was drawing and talking was so informative. I shared that with some colleagues and said, this actually will help you because I know you're struggling with this concept. Yeah. And she just did such a good job of breaking down those ideas that a lot of our teachers aren't getting. And then they land a job where all of a sudden they're teaching astronomy and they never took a class on astronomy, right?
Yeah. Yes. And one of the things that I experienced while I was working on the editing of her video and kind of adding in images and all of that, I experienced a lot of moments of mindfulness and relaxation, right, in the way that she presented it. And that is not something we typically associate with physics and astronomy. Yeah. But her ability to make such a complex phenomenon so accessible, and not just accessible, but inviting. It felt like yoga for the mind, right, to be drawing a galaxy with her and thinking about fusion. She made that seem very accessible. In fact, as I was going through it, I'm not a physicist, and I'm certainly don't have any background in astronomy. And I was like, oh yeah, I can easily pick out the chemical reaction she's talking about there and find depictions. But I would have never been able to do that without the guidance she was giving in a really accessible way. So I love that as just simply a piece that brings the knowledge of a researcher, but she does it in a really, she leaves the door open, and the windows. It's like, come on in, everybody. This is knowledge for everybody. So yeah, thanks for that.
No, I just thought how amazing. She should make a series of these videos based around the standards for our Wyoming teachers because of that feeling. I just thought, I've worked with teachers that have said, how do I find a phenomena for kids that they're going to connect to this? These are so abstract ideas. They're so complicated. I mean, these are ideas that, I was like watching that going, just this, the same as you, like, wow, like I'm totally sending this to this teacher because there were like, how many ways to access your kids' prior knowledge and get them engaged in this complex, difficult, too hard for this age level kid. And she did it, right?
Mm-hmm.
I just thought she would be excellent to look at some of those standards for outer space and universe and make some, just simple, fun tutorial like videos like that. But that's a side note that I thought that was very excellent, and would help a lot of teachers who don't have that background but find themselves with that standard to teach.
Yeah, thank you for that. And I know I can tell you that will inspire Jessica beyond measure. She, because I don't think she always knows that what she's doing really does make a difference, and not just for the students, but for the teachers too. So I think she will be inspired to do more. So.
Well, she should be. Yeah. So I saw these working. I think that they would be great phenomenon in all those different ways. And then, like I said, in the time of the pandemic, the chemistry experiments, if you're going to do more, I just love that kitchen. I mean, when I taught in a low economic school in South Dakota, I mean, we did kitchen chemistry all the time, right? But just the idea of the fact that these videos, you could even, the kids could go buy the stuff, you could challenge them to replicate those experiments and see what your outcomes would be, or you could just let them watch the video and they could create their own claim and evidence and reasoning statements about what they watched if they didn't have the money or the supplies to do the chemistry at home. I just thought that was an excellent way to use them during the pandemic. But then again, I don't see why a teacher wouldn't want to take it, like I said, a clip, a short version of it, anchor the kids in this idea, get them asking questions, and then you've already, as a teacher, got a very safe experiment you could do. I know, like in chemistry at the high school, they probably already have more complicated or complex experiments they could do. So they could challenge the kids to watch this simple video on cabbage and then say, how could we replicate it here using these supplies? I just think a lot of ways to use these as a phenomena to get the kids asking questions and bringing in the cross-cutting concepts of systems, cause and effect, patterns. And then also the kids getting the DCIs, the disciplinary concepts, as they're working through solving, why did it go pink? Why did it go blue? Why did it, right? That's what I saw from these.
Yeah. And I think the one last thing that kind of hits me too is just connecting with somebody who is a graduate student, an undergraduate student, and saying, wow, they love this enough to do this in their kitchen at home, that it's a bit of role modeling too, that I think can be meaningful to the kids who might be thinking, why is this interesting to me? And to see that excitement that they're sharing that as well is always a hope that I have.
Yeah, it's always a hope we all have. Please go into science.
Yeah. Oh, well, thank you so much, Allie. This is absolutely perfect.
Well, I'm glad to help. Anytime you guys want any connections, let me know. That's what, I'm trying to work on and be better at, and communicate with other teachers so that they can feel more comfortable with these new standards as well.
Yeah, yeah, and that it just does take time to have that comfort to move between them and connect them, and absolutely.